Chapter 3, Anchored in a Delusion with No Air. The body has a sympathetic and a parasympathetic response system, also known as quote-unquote fight or flight mode. When the body is calm, it's in a sympathetic mode and it's easier to breathe. Parasympathetic response mode takes effect when there's projections added to this quote-unquote square sandbox. For example, when I'm bombarded by projected motions within the quote-unquote sandbox, my stimuli is constantly being stimulated, changing my rhythmic breathing patterns. This delusional world is full of symbolism and projected motions that make it hard to breathe. Quote-unquote Atlantis is a world considered to be under the sea, which means it's a submerged world. Quote-unquote planet Earth is actually symbolic of Atlantis because it's submerged in quote-unquote air, representing conscious water or thought. This is why in the tarot, the star card illustrates a naked lady pouring a vase of water into a stream, the water bearer. The card also illustrates a tree with a bird on top of the tree, representing a watchful eye or a bird's eye view. This is just more symbolism. How this quote-unquote fake world delusion has been projected from my conscience. When we think of the quote-unquote hand of God, we must know that the astrological sign of Gemini represents mutable air. And the magician card in the tarot, this quote-unquote delusional world is just basically a magic trick. When I delve into my astrological chart or the quote-unquote blueprint of how this delusional world was consciously created, you will understand that Chiron, a meteor, is placed in the sign of Gemini, conjunct the North Node, quote-unquote Rahu, in Taurus, fixed Earth. Chiron is considered to be the wounded healer and is also Pawn, or the Pied Piper. Through symbolism, you will understand how this is actually symbolic of the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus Christ, and one as a sacrificial lamb cross on matter. This is why I've always had an irregular rhythmic breathing pattern. I've been anchored down in this quote-unquote delusional world that does not have real air. It's all symbolism. For instance, the word oxygen can be broken to ox, y, and gen. Ox representing the astrological sign Taurus the bull, the letter Y representing man, and gen, the invisible amorphous cloud of quote-unquote cautious water formed from thought. I am the only thing grounding this delusion, serving as an anchor. Think of this world being a quote-unquote delusional dream, and I'm the source that can materialize the delusion. Just like pixels on a television screen, the square within a circle on my shoulders has a bird's eye view to project a real-life movie. This is why I've always felt the weight of the world, just like Atlas, carrying a depiction of Earth on his back, a mobile map. More information to relay back to source so I can further understand how this delusion was made possible. I have so many placements in the zodiac sign of Scorpio, fixed water, symbolizing an iceberg. And if we analyze Anchorage, Alaska, this will symbolize frozen quote-unquote Earth, or Encino Man, frozen in ice. I've been preserved from a cold black hole to be warmed up in order to make the quote-unquote Garden of Eden possible. If we examine the shape of the United States of America, it resembles a land mammal. We will use a bull, for example. The head symbolizes Maine and California, representing the tail. Also, the head, Maine, is faced towards Europe. The U.S. also started with 50 states, reducing down to 5, again representing Gemini, mutable air, and the magician card in the tarot. Alaska and Hawaii came later, increasing the number to 52, which equates to 7. There are 7 chakras, Alaska representing the crown and Hawaii representing the sacral. The number 7 correlates to Pisces and the Hanged Man in the tarot. The Hanged Man is the enlightened one, hung upside down, that is exacerbating light from its crown. It's exuberating light from its crown. This coincidence is trying to symbolically elaborate that we are born into heaven than are to experience hell later because we're returning back to our quote-unquote roots. The North Pole can be considered Alaska, the crown, and the South Pole can be considered Hawaii, the sacral. Heaven, starting out life, is considered to be cold and hot, representing a fun hell where life is warm or mammalian. And heaven, starting out hot, then cold, represents later life becomes frigidly cold and dead. This is what the hanged man in the tarot represents, the enlightened one flipped upside down with a bright light emitting from his head. Also, the number 7 numerologically represents a church or a temple. Anatomically, my temples is where the conscience resides. This is why I'm constantly being subliminally forced to hear lies nonstop, because this delusion that I'm in is trying to take control of the narrative. Further examination of Earth reveals the top covered in ice and the bottom covered in ice. The center coined the equator is considered to be the warmest. This is also anatomically symbolic of the heart. Let's put penguins into perspective. They can survive in cold temperatures on the North and South poles. They nest and egg on their feet, passing between each adult. Mary Mac cleaned Jesus Christ's feet with her tears, and Jesus fed the men with plenty of fish. The eyes of Mary warmed Jesus' heart, birthing hope for mankind, just like the penguins kept the eggs off the ice with their feet and preserving their kind with fish. Earth representing the cross on matter, Jesus Christ's body, both in one with the sacred prostitute, which is actually the Virgin Mary. Now we must ask how the Virgin Mary is a sacred prostitute. She's representative to me being a transgender male that is still a quote-unquote virgin. However, I've been a prostitute having sexual intercourse through sodomy. Jesus Christ's quote-unquote story is considering him to also be a virgin. However, the Freemason Illuminati folklore participates in sodomy for manpower. If we break the word Mason down, it reveals Ma, son. Again, mother and child existing in one body, a heart, red and blue. The Earth's equator. Considering to be the existent during the age of artificial intelligence, the quality of natural weather environment has been greatly impacted. The age of Aquarius has brought on many different levels of experimental conspiracies. The weather being manipulated through chemical trails, cloud seeding, ionospheric heaters, bunker fuels, antenna frequencies, 5G, and deforestation. This has all been brought to my attention in order to manipulate the scene. The seeds of this information has been planted within my conscience to have this quote-unquote God-like power to be used against me in order to control my existence because I am source. Because I've revealed the truth of this delusional world's a secret, everything is basically weaponized to hurt me. My mind has been exploited and harvested to manipulate and create this delusional world just to create a kill grid war game in the end. It's hard to believe that I'm the one to anchor this power trip of an delusion to this imaginary dangerous sandbox. My quote-unquote father served in Desert Storm, which was a war in Lebanon during the early gay 90s. This is no more than a desert projecting a magic trick illusion. I suddenly realized that this desert trick projection was an actual television set that I could no longer breathe in. Could you imagine that projected quote-unquote people or any other form of quote-unquote life suffocating on a TV monitor? The idea of this is radical. However, this AI age has these delusional depictions of quote-unquote people thinking they're actually real. When I came to my actual senses, it brought awareness that enabled me to see quote-unquote people in their truest form, a mere hologram or projection. Seeing them on a TV monitor was no different than seeing them in the square sandbox within a circle. In a TV screen monitor, it's one-dimensional, and within my sandbox, it turns three-dimensional. When I travel, the sandbox turns four-dimensional, representing the compass north, south, east, and west. Fifth dimension is 5G, and soup of antenna frequencies that can manipulate my senses easily within the sandbox. For me, the sixth dimension is going to be my transcendence and the deletion of this delusional world and the quote-unquote idea of people. The delusion knows that I consciously understand that smart devices are just a way of symbolizing what quote-unquote mankind actually is, which is an act. Using electronics is now understood equivalently using quote-unquote people to do things. Understanding the secret world has now made it a threat and my biggest enemy. This is exactly how polarities work and how a power struggle is always a result. I am the apocalypse, the end of quote-unquote mankind.